The fifth and final season of Stranger Things has finally concluded.
So, what better time than now to revisit the entire show and put together our rankings of every episode from worst to best.
As you've noticed by now, there are two of us, Daniel and Ashlyn, so this video will work a little differently than other ranking videos.
What we have done is we have both put together our own unique individual rankings of every episode.
Then we merged both of our lists together based on average placements to create our final combined rankings.
Whilst doing our research, we kept our rankings hidden from one another as we thought it would prevent influence.
So it'll be interesting to reveal which episodes we agreed and disagreed on with our placements.
So, without further ado, let's begin with our lowest ranked episode for Stranger Things.
No surprises here, as Ashlyn and I unanimously ranked The Lost Sister last on both of our rankings, earning it the unfortunate placement of 42nd on our combined list. This is the episode where Eleven goes to Chicago to find her sister Carly, or 8, who escaped from Hawkins' lab and also has powers of her own.
Yeah, this episode really stands out as the worst for the entire show and is significantly worse than all the others. Eleven gets a new look and tries fitting in with the group of criminals, but Eleven returns back to Hawkins as the episode ends, and we don't see Callie until season 5, which makes this episode feel very isolated from the rest of the show and just very unnecessary.
Not to mention that this episode also comes after a great cliffhanger in episode 6, so it really derailed the momentum of the season. They just got going only for this 11 subplot. And whilst this might be the worst episode of the show for us, I will say this episode isn't as horrendous as we might be making it out to be, and it's actually a lot better than a lot of other shows' worst episodes.
It definitely ruins the flow and honestly just doesn't fit the vibes of the show. It's one of those episodes Daniel and I skip on rewatch. Overall, we both agree, like many Stranger Things fans, that this is the worst that Stranger Things has to offer. But at least it's all uphill from here. Mad Max has earned itself our second lowest ranked episode. We would both like to point out that there is a significant gap between this and The Lost Sister. Mad Max kicks off season 2. This episode is just slow paced as we are being introduced to new characters and plot lines.
Yeah, all of the episodes from this point onwards we would both consider good episodes for the show, which demonstrates how consistent it is disregarding The Lost Sister. After the great ending to the first season, this was interesting seeing where our characters were at now, but definitely didn't kick things off with the intensity that we had gotten used to. Just bringing in characters like Max, Billy, Bob and Murray, who all play a big role going forward, but it just wasn't a very eventful episode all in all.
At the end of the episode, there was a dramatic revelation that Eleven was alive and Hopper was taking care of her, which was really interesting as these two are very unlikely characters to put together.
That probably was the highlight of the episode, but we also got to see the gate to the Upside Down is growing. But although there were some good moments to take from this one, there are still 40 episodes which we believe beat this one out. Another season 2 episode ranking low for us as once again we are in agreement for our ranking. I know a lot of people love this episode, so a placement this low might feel controversial, but on rewatch this episode really felt uneventful again for the most part. I do really love the vibes in this one though, and it feels like classic Stranger Things.
Yep, this episode just kind of continued that slow pace of season 2. However, as a Halloween lover, I thought that this was a really fun episode and it paid homage to many 80s movies. I do agree that the vibes are amazing and true to the show, and it was interesting seeing Will's episodes as well. You know that these episodes are building up to something very exciting that will be happening later in the season.
Yeah, lots of 80s references in this one, which was fun. The main one being the boys dressing up as the Ghostbusters for Halloween, but honestly there's not much more to comment on for this one.
The good vibes just weren't enough to save this episode from a low placement on our rankings, unfortunately. Well, here is our first tiny disagreement. This episode kicks off season 3, and it really shocked me as the vibes were completely different. My first watch of the season, I was a bit harsh on my opinion, as it felt like this wasn't the show I had been watching for 2 seasons, but it did eventually grow on me.
I actually didn't mind the change, as it was interesting seeing them try something different than what they had been doing. It's just that they seem to be following this formula of the early episodes in a season being slower and setting up what is to come.
Yes, after I was able to get over my fear of the change, I was really able to appreciate the change up. And in all fairness, if they continued this season like they had the previous 2 seasons, it probably would have grown a little repetitive. This episode just sets a completely different tone for the show, and we get to see them in summer, which was really fun and really created a different visual aesthetic for the show.
We got introduced to the Russian storyline in this episode, which was definitely an interesting addition, but nothing else notable happens until the end, where Billy is ambushed. At least we finally gave season 2 a break in our rankings. Following on with season 3, we now have episode 2, The Mallrats. Yet another early episode in the season ranking low for us. Still some cool stuff to see here, but for me, it felt like they were just waiting until the mid-season to really get going.
I 100% agree with you, and I do feel that this is a little bit more fast-paced as an early episode than it was in the other 2 seasons. We have Joyce standing up poor Hopper, Billy fighting his demons, and Eleven dumps Mike. Actually, she dumped his ass. So at least we know this season will be action-packed.
Yeah, the stuff with Billy is probably my highlight for the beginning of this season, and I was excited to see where they were going to take his character. Some great acting from Dacre Montgomery here.
He did do his big one this season. Now, let's see what ranked 37th. I enjoyed this episode due to a spook factor. Once Will is possessed, he is now referring to the Mind Flayer as he, and there's a bit more of an eerie feel to this episode, which I really appreciated.
We also had the famous line of "You are like Papa" during Eleven and Hopper's big argument, which further showed how talented the cast are for the show, as that was a great scene with some brilliant performances.
The acting was great. Also, RIP to Muse the cat. This episode was again a build-up for the season, whilst also delivering some great moments.
They are slowly building up the characters of Max and Billy in this episode, and we also got that great shot of Hopper in the tunnels to conclude the episode. And now let's move on to our ranking of 36th. Yet another season 2 episode, as this is the one where we are introduced to Dustin's pet Dart.
This episode not only introduced us to Dart, but also the Mind Flayer. When Joyce's boyfriend Bob gives Will some good intended but bad advice, we see a spooky possession take place. We are also introduced to Eleven's rebellious behavior as she sneaks out of the house for a few hours.
One moment I particularly enjoyed about this episode was when Joyce finds the outline of the Mind Flayer on Will's recording. A really chilling moment seeing her come to this realization, as the show does such a great job of these types of reveals.
I very much agree. The reveals of even small details are executed so perfectly, and it's one of the things that I really love about this show. The best part of this episode, for me, was the Max and Lucas reunion. The acting was just incredible from Caleb and Sadie, and it was so raw and emotional, and the whole scene was just phenomenal. And of course, everyone's glad to have Max back. This also kicked off the episode, but unfortunately, I felt like the episode just went downhill and it didn't maintain the same tone that it started off with.
This is actually the lowest rated episode of the show on IMDb, and the majority of the internet hated it. Was it the worst episode of the show though? No, I think it's pretty solid overall. Maybe just because of its placement being the second to last of the entire show, building up to the final, it was quite underwhelming.
For sure, I think that Holly's scenes were solid, and her running from Vecna was really fun to watch. However, there's a big scene with Will coming out, and I just think it was poorly executed. I also didn't care for Callie's scenes, so it was just a big disappointment in the episode.
I actually didn't mind most of those scenes, it just felt out of place being in the build up for the grand finale. Compared to the penultimate episode for other seasons, this one definitely felt flat, just isn't the worst of the show for me like many others think. And here's our first appearance for season 4, with it being episode 3, The Monster and the Superhero. Pretty uneventful compared to the others in the season, but still pretty good. I think the main talking point from this episode was Eleven agreeing to go with Dr. Owens to try and get her powers back, setting up for later in the season that Eleven could come and save the day.
This episode, although very good, just had some tough competition in season 4. This episode ended with a great cliffhanger of Max seeing the clock and revealing that she had been cursed by Vecna, which again brings us back to a previous point that this show does so well with the dramatic reveals.
Yeah, they had built up Vecna so well in this season up to this point as a scary villain, so now seeing Max as being targeted definitely had us amped up for the next episodes.
Next we have season 5, episode 1. I did like this episode, but I think it was just very different on how season 4 left off. Because of the time jump, it just felt like we missed so much and nothing really made sense. And again, it is an introduction to the story, and so it's more slow paced than the later episodes.
Yeah, I think if you factor in the fact that we had to wait 3 years for this episode, we would have hoped it would be a bit more eventful after what we saw in the season 4 finale. But overall, it was cool to see how Hawkins was now put on lockdown.
You, Daniel, put my thoughts into words. I would have imagined this episode to be more eventful, but it is what it is. However, a very notable moment in this episode was when we went back to season 1 and seeing Will in the Upside Down. Nobody knew Will was moving like that. It was really interesting to see what he was actually going through and seeing how it relates back to season 5.
That opening scene was great, and it was a pretty fun opening episode to the season, but there's definitely a lot of episodes that can place above it. So let's see as we move on to 32nd. Wow, 10 places difference in our individual rankings here as The Dive ranks 32nd. I honestly think the lack of Vecna in this episode impacted its placement for me.
This episode did so many things very well. Some things I would like to point out is the dinner feast with the Russian prisoners. I really liked the visuals of that, and I thought it just created an eerie feeling, and it was just very well presented. Another is when everyone was shocked about our beloved babysitter getting dragged into the Upside Down. I think they had some good scenes in this episode, but overall it was just kind of there compared to the others.
I did really enjoy that cliffhanger with Steve, as on the first watch it definitely felt like it could be the end of him. This episode was just missing those jaw-dropping moments that most of the other season 4 episodes had, which is why it had the lowest rank of the season on my list.
I also would like to know how crazy it is for a whole town of adults to turn on a bunch of high school kids for a D&D club. But anyways, it is also interesting seeing Eleven's time in the lab. One thing that made this episode kind of boring and my least favorite part about season 4 is when they're in California. I unfortunately just don't really care too much for those scenes. But let's dive into our 31st place.
Next up, we go all the way back to season 1, episode 2, The Weirdo on Maple Street. We learned more about Eleven as she is hiding out in Mike's basement, and we find out that she knows something about Will's disappearance, which was intriguing tying those two stories together.
This episode continued to set an ominous tone for the series. We are still being teased with Eleven's backstory with just quick flashbacks, as well as a supernatural presence affecting more of the residents of Hawkins. This episode kept a thrilling and exciting pace, especially for it to be only the second episode. It did get points knocked down for Jonathan's creepy picture taking though.
A very strange choice for him to have that for his character, because up until this point we was feeling bad for Jonathan, but this really derailed my want or care to enjoy his character. That ending scene with Bar being taken into the Upside Down was amazing though, one of my favourite ends to an episode from the first season.
That scene was impeccable. It was so mysterious and a little scary, and you truly have no idea what's going on. The show takes you on a journey with the characters of connecting the dots and solving the clues, which is a quality I really enjoyed with this season. The episode of all episodes, the one that kicked off this franchise. The episode is immensely nostalgic to me, and this is one where you remember exactly where you were when watching it for the first time.
I can see the hate comments already, as even though we are the ones who made this ranking, this episode still looks low down. On rewatch, I definitely did expect this one to be a lot higher up, because as you said, it is so nostalgic and does a great job setting up the show, but I think it just lacks action as it spends most of the episode introducing us to characters.
I agree. When I first started this, I went in thinking that this was going to rank way higher on my list. However, like you said, it's more introducing the characters. The vibes, however, are immaculate and really hooks you in. This is a memorable episode, but this just had really tough competition.
I think starting the episode with Will's disappearance was a great decision, as it instantly made me interested in the show, and it does do a pretty good job at educating us on who all the characters are in such a short time, allowing the rest of the season to build off of this.
We jump back to season 2 for this ranking. This episode for me was a turning point in the series. As we mentioned before, the other episodes for season 2, they were just a bit more slow paced, but this episode really amped up the antics for this season.
Yeah, all the characters had their own separate missions by this point in the season. A really fun scene with Dustin trying to capture Dart in the storm cellar, and again, a great ending wanting us to quickly move on to the next episode as we found out that Will was feeling pain as the scientists were burning the tunnel.
Speaking of that scene with Dustin, that was the beginning of everyone's favorite duo. I think this scene, there's a lot more interactions between unlikely characters, and it made this season more fun with the mix-up in dynamics. This episode had a great mix of comedy and drama. We get comedic relief from Murray, Dustin, and Steve, but we also have very dramatic moments with Hopper and Will.
I will say the one storyline I didn't enjoy as much was the stuff with Eleven, probably because of what it leads to, but overall we are definitely getting into some great episodes of the show now, but we still have a long way to go until we get to our highest rankings. Quite a significant difference in our ratings in this episode, as I have it 7 places higher than Ashton. This one is the first time we saw one of our characters enter through a gate to the Upside Down, as Nancy goes in whilst out monster hunting.
This is a really important episode, and it has a lot of good revelations in it, and it just has really good elements. However, I just don't care for this episode, and I don't know why. It's so good, but there's just something about it.
I love how we started the episode off with Hopper finding stuff in the lab and then being taken out, with them setting a scene at his place. Also having a funeral for Will whilst all those closest to him now believing he was actually still alive was pretty crazy.
A very important moment in this episode I'd like to point out is the flea and the acrobat example from Mr. Clark. This gave us a good insight to how the Upside Down was created, and it was a really fascinating reveal. The monster is one of our biggest differences, with me ranking it 15 spots higher than Daniel. I really liked this episode, and it was very memorable. This episode was like core Stranger Things, dealing with supernatural threats, but also still dealing with natural problems. I love all things supernatural, however, this episode is a reminder that they are still kids going to school and embracing being outcast.
I thought this was the weakest episode of the first season, which is probably why we have such a difference in our ranking. My favourite parts from season 1 were the mystery elements, however this one just felt like dealing with annoying school bullies and teenage drama. No, it's still a good episode for me, but just lacking what I loved from the first season.
I do agree with you to an extent. I would have liked more of a mysterious element in this episode. However, the end really resonated with me emotionally. I loved when we see Eleven reunite with the boys and they comfort her and remind her that she is not a monster. I think the break from all the thriller was needed, and it allows them to rehook you into the series in the next episode.
I will say, Eleven saving Mike was definitely the highlight of the episode for me. What an amazing visual of Mike levitating above the quarry. And now let's move on to number 26. Feels like we haven't talked about season 3 for a while, but we are back to it. This episode starts off action-packed, Steve's group trying to escape the Russians and Eleven dealing with the mind flayer creature at the hospital, which might I say the design for this thing was awesome.
The hospital scene was chef's kiss. The monster and the other possessed were terrifying. Now, regarding the Russian storyline, it was really hard for me to get behind it at first because it felt very out of place, but it was fun watching Dustin and Erica save Steve and Robin. The plot developing with Elle and Billy is also really exciting, and we see so many more threats than before.
Yeah, Eleven going into Billy's memories felt like a movie, as those scenes look so cool. As much as I love season 1 Hopper, and Hopper this season is very different, his scenes with Alexei were really funny in this episode, which also gave this episode some bonus points.
Now into our top 25. I really liked this episode. Weirdly enough, one of the elements I really liked about it was that it was set on a rainy day. I thought it created a different aesthetic, and it really promoted the eerie feel to it. And this episode just did so well with the creepy factor.
I really enjoyed the storyline of Billy gathering the army for the Mind Flayer throughout this season. And when Max and Eleven find him at Heather's house, he's so creepy in his mannerisms as he's being controlled, which I know draws comparisons to Vecna even though he's not introduced yet, as it is implied he was doing the controlling.
Yes, that was incredible writing. And for the mannerisms to be revealed to be Vecna a season later was genius.
I also really enjoyed Will's scenes with him being upset and destroying Castle Byers, whilst it feels like his friends have moved on to the next chapter of their lives, whilst he's been missing out after what he endured these last few years. Now let's move on to our ranking for 24th. Remember when we said how season 2 had just got its momentum going before the Lost Sister came to ruin it? Well, this is the episode where the season hits its stride for me. A really suspenseful and high stakes ending when it's revealed Will is being used by the Mind Flayer as a spy, and Demodogs are now flooding the lab.
Ooh, it's getting exciting now. I really enjoyed the scene of Steve and the kids at the junkyard. It was sweet seeing Max be accepted. We also see babysitter Steve taking care of business. But back at the hospital, once Mike realizes Will is a spy, your heart drops and you feel the adrenaline through the episode. The cliffhanger had you on the edge of your seat, anticipating the next episode.
I thought that scene at the junkyard was brilliant as well, definitely one of the strongest episodes from the season for me. And although I wasn't the biggest fan of Jonathan, his and Nancy's scene as they got together was also really good, and having Murray there to tease them afterwards was very funny.
Murray was a treat this season. The show does an excellent job at dividing the group and having them explore very different storylines. Now, let's look at our 23rd place. I will say this again and again. Within season 4, there was just a lot of tough competition between the episodes. This one was good. However, as we noticed by now, there's a pattern with the first couple episodes of the season being a bit weaker.
This episode is the fallout of what happened to Chrissy in the first episode and the introduction of Vecna, and he doesn't chill out in this one as he targets Nancy's colleague Fred and kills him in another gory scene. Every time you see those kills, it doesn't get any easier.
No, because why was this season actually so scary? Which honestly, this season felt more mature and serious, and I felt like it goes back to the tone of the first 2 seasons, with a small town horror vibe. Another highlight for this episode is seeing Hopper and how he ended up in a Russian prison, as well as the introduction to Vecna and Victor Krill.
We also had the scenes in California with Mike seeing Eleven has been getting bullied, which is probably the part that holds this episode back, and we could both do without it. Still a pretty good rating overall though, as we are nearly halfway through our rankings. The ranking for the Flayed falls right between what Ashton and I ranked individually. Probably one of my favourite openings to an episode in the whole show, as it felt like it dropped you right in the middle of an episode with how intense it was. This is also the one where we get the famous Joyce Drive line.
This episode is an interesting one. Hopper is just so silly this season. Murray is back on our screens, which is a delight, and now they have a Russian hostage. Steve, Robin, Dustin, and Erica are also about to be hostages. And, not to mention, Nancy totally kills a dude. And the gore surrounding this fleshy monster is so intense, and it really just adds to the season.
What a great action sequence at the hospital. We already mentioned the monster briefly when talking about the next episode, but Nancy and Jonathan working in tandem to take down the mind-controlled bosses was really cool. Overall, a pretty fun and memorable episode as we are now halfway through our rankings.
Our 21st ranking is Nina. This episode was good in many ways. Dr. Brenner comes back and is to help Elle regain her powers. But do we trust him? I really enjoyed watching Eleven relive her memories from Hawkins' lab, and it has answered many questions I've had since season 1.
I am glad they brought back Dr. Brenner for this season, as he's always a great addition to the show. There's a really sad scene in this episode with Hopper, with some brilliant acting from David Harbour, but then you contrast that with the scenes with Murray and Joyce crash landing Yuri's plane, and it just makes for a great mix of emotions.
Oh my god, that was such a random moment, but it was so great. This episode really increased my anxiety though. Hopper seems to be giving up, his help just crashed in a plane, the jocks are after Eddie, and Max is cursed. Which gave us another Nancy clutch moment as she realized what Max saw was the Krill house.
And as for Vecna, he is ramping up his kill count as he claims another life, making him more and more of a threat to our group as the season approaches its second half. Into our top 20 now, and it starts with one of our biggest disagreements. This one nearly breaking into Ashton's top 10, but all the way down in 26th for me. Obviously this one has one of the best shots of the season when Eleven flips the van over them, but other than that for me, this just felt like a montage of going to school and building a pool for Eleven.
The bathtub is iconic. Eleven is that girl, and the friend group makes up and everyone reunites. Which is my favorite aspect of the show, is when everyone reunites and they all debrief and come up with new plans. This one is more special because they all get to meet Eleven. There are so many great shots in this scene and beautifully executed aesthetics. It was fun watching them go make the deprivation tank, and we see how selfless Eleven is by using her powers to help. This episode was great for Eleven being introduced to more human connections.
Maybe it's because I prefer the big jaw-dropping moments from the show, but this episode felt uneventful for the most part for me. I still had a good time with it, just not enough to put it higher than 26th on my list.
I do love the jaw-dropping moments, but I also find beauty in the simplicity but well-written episodes too. I did rank many episodes low for their uneventful components, but I think this episode made up for it. Fan speculation really had me worried that Stevie Boy was going to die this episode, but luckily that was not the case. This episode I debated on if I ranked too high. There were really weak parts of this episode, but there was also some really strong moments that I greatly appreciated.
Now that we finally have Carly back in the show after not seeing her since season 2, she revealed how she was captured and the government is trying to restart Dr. Brenner's program of making more kids with powers. This was a crazy reveal that it seems that they are never going to learn from their mistakes and will never stop searching for Eleven.
One scene I thought that was so great was Max and Holly going through their memories when Vecna catches them and Will takes over Vecna. I think because many feel this season was disappointing that this scene was overlooked. Jamie Campbell Bower's acting is phenomenal, and when he shows his human side, he does some amazing facial expressions which were really scary.
Obviously, we are newly introduced to Will being able to tap into Vecna's powers, so seeing him being able to fully restrain him here was unreal. We also got that great cliffhanger with Nancy shooting the massive exotic matter, which made you just want to click on to the next episode instantly. So let's do that as we move on to our ranking for 18th. On to season 3 episode 7 now, and this is unfortunately the death of everyone's favourite Russian, Alexei. A lot is going down at the 4th of July fair, as Hopper is being chased for a funhouse and fair rides by the Terminator guy, which makes for some really fun settings in their fights.
No, poor Alexei. That was absolutely heartbreaking. Also, RIP to Hopper's and Elle's cabin because the Mind Flayer absolutely destroyed it, and injuring Eleven in the process. This episode, everyone is coming together and heading towards the mall, which I love when they all come together.
This episode is also quite famous for the scene with Robin and Steve, as Steve confesses his feelings to her after their Russian-based mission, and Robin opens up to Steve that she actually likes girls. It's great how the show can mix together these moments of calm and vulnerability amongst the scenes of utter chaos unfolding at the fair and Hopper's cabin.
Yeah, I agree. The show does an excellent job of balancing those moments, which is so important to the dynamic of the show. I also really enjoyed finally seeing Eleven get to hang out with the group. Through all the different storylines and new chaos, it is still this group getting through this together, and that felt special. This episode was very action-packed and a great episode preparing the season finale. There is so much to uncover for this episode. Nancy is getting the Vecna backstory, we know Papa used Eleven to unleash Henry, and Papa showed he hasn't changed and sedates Eleven, and the military finds them. However, the biggest event is Papa's death. I wouldn't say that he redeems himself, but after being shot, he lets Eleven go. I think that this scene was just finally closing a chapter in Papa for Eleven and for us.
Accompany that with one of the coolest shots of the season as Eleven single-handedly crashed down a helicopter with her powers, causing a massive explosion. Also some great dialogue between Eleven and Brenner and what would be his final appearance in the show.
Another absolutely sensational scene I loved is at the end when the teens back at Hawkins are preparing for battle. Driving into the battle with the trailer, the remix version of the song Separate Worlds playing, and the sun setting was such an exquisite shot.
Overall, I had this episode quite a bit higher than Ashin, nearly making my top 10, as in some ways it felt as big and eventful as a finale was also just leading into the actual finale with what's about to unfold with Vecna. We also saw the Russian crew escape the prison for what won't be the final time. Onto the Turnbow track now, and I love the stuff with Eleven and Hopper in the Upside Down here, as the military find them and are able to neutralize 11 powers, so Hopper takes it upon himself to take them all out with grenades. They then interrogate Lieutenant Ackers as 11 taps into his mind to reveal they're keeping something special hidden.
This episode brought a little comedy to the season while also giving some very serious moments. They had to kidnap a whole family and destroy their house, if only they didn't eat that damn pie. Holly is also having the time of her life at the Crow House. It is strange and creepy that Henry is abducting children, but okay. Also, a very special moment is when Holly is lured out into the woods by the one and the only Max Mayfield.
That was a great reveal, and we were glad to have Max back on the show. The sequence with everyone at the Turnbow's house working together to take down the Demogorgon was also really fun and memorable for me, which helped this episode get a high placement on my rankings. And as you said, we already know Vecna by now, so to see more of Henry, or Mr. What's-It I guess, and this freaky persona of his was also entertaining to see.
This episode, I actually almost ranked number 1 from season 3. There was just this element of this episode I greatly enjoyed. There are so many creepy factors to this episode with the flayed, and I loved it. We saw Heather's dad get sacrificed to the monster, Steve, Robin, Erica, and Dustin get trapped in an elevator, and there's just a lot of weird things happening in this town. We also get to see Hopper beat up the mayor, which was very satisfying.
And by the title of the episode, you guessed it, that this is the one where Billy is lured and trapped into the sauna room in an attempt to expel the Mind Flayer from him. We see the other members of the Hive Mind feeling his pain, and once again some really great acting as Billy pleads to Max, only to then lunge at her.
I think the intense possession element this season is so cool, but also so unsettling. But yes, the actual sauna scene was amazing.
Overall, as I said earlier, season 3 started a bit slow and uneventful, with the vibes feeling off, but this episode in particular really got us back into the swing of Stranger Things we've come to know and got us excited for what's to come. First season finale to appear on our ranking is for season 1, coming in at 14th. Season finales are typically some of the best and biggest episodes of a show, but Stranger Things in particular love to go big towards the end. I think the biggest moment from the first season finale is Eleven seemingly taking herself out whilst killing a Demogorgon. However, there are some teasers that she is still alive and out there somewhere for us to explore in season 2.
I agree. I think I found it harder to appreciate this episode as I was just excited and waiting for season 2. I would also like to point out that I am ranking these as someone who is photosensitive, so I actually can't watch a lot of scenes in this show. This episode was one of many that were very difficult to watch. But regardless, I don't feel like this finale is the strongest out of all the seasons, which I know may get backlash because many people hated season 5's finale.
Another one of my favourite highlights from this episode was Steve's redemption, as him, Jonathan and Nancy took on a Demogorgon at the Byers household with some really intense scenes. We also had Dr. Brennan's fake out death at the school, and eventually Hopper and Joyce rescued Will from the Upside Down. Very dramatic as Hopper doesn't give up on Will and they make it back to the real world all in one piece. But not everything is back to normal, teasing for the second season.
Yes, I'm so glad they gave the redemption to Steve instead of Lonnie. I think it was fun having him exposed to this mess and his very relatable reaction. I'm glad they were able to rescue Will, but poor Elle and Mike. I do like how they flash forwarded to them playing D&D in the basement and how they left a small cookie crumb for the next season. Our next finale ranked is from season 2. I really enjoyed this finale. I mean, what's not to love? As I mentioned many times, I adore when they all reunite, and this is a big reunion. Eleven comes back with her new bitchin' style to save her friends. It is such a heartwarming moment, and the scene is also written and directed very well.
As great as it was them all reuniting, they all quickly split up into separate groups once again. Eleven and Hopper going to the gate to close it for good. And I mean, in what other show than Stranger Things do you get a visual like this? Joyce, Nancy and Jonathan go to perform an exorcism on Will and burn the mind flayer out of him, and Steve is stuck on babysitting duty.
Yeah, they do split up once again. However, I didn't mind it this time. Babysitter Steve pulled out his mama bear when Billy attempted to hurt Lucas. Han also mixing up Mike with Nancy was so funny. And then you have such heartwarming moments with Hopper and Eleven. Then the Byers plus Nancy, well, that was just scary. So I think they brought a good contrast and balance, and it really made this episode a good watch as well as good for the story.
There was also somewhat of a happy ending to this season, as all the kids got to go to their school snowball dance, including Eleven for a special occasion. Lucas and Max seal their romance, and Dustin gets to dance with Nancy, making him the coolest kid in the year. However, the season ends with us seeing the Mind Flayer is still very much present in the Upside Down and ready to cause havoc in season 3. My first personal top 10 episode appears in our combined ranking, as The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler comes in at 12. I remember when the leaks came out for the episode title names for season 5, and this was one that was very intriguing, and it did not disappoint, as that cold open of the Demogorgon wiping out the Wheeler household was one of the most jaw-dropping scenes I've seen in a long time.
This was jaw-dropping for sure. It did feel wrong placing it higher than season 1 episode 1, however this episode did just have a really good shock factor. I think it was really exciting and thrilling. You just couldn't believe your eyes, and I loved seeing Karen do her big one. We now know where Nancy, Walk 'em Down Wheeler, gets it from.
I will say that opening sequence definitely does a lot of the heavy lifting for this episode. However, there were some other great moments, like the reveal that the Mr. What's-It that Holly had been speaking to was actually Henry or Vecna. And in the Upside Down, Hopper and Eleven discover there is a massive wall surrounding Hawkins, which led to all kinds of theories.
This is the best first episode of any season, hands down. After season 3 changed up the vibes a bit, we return to a more season 1 and season 2 vibe. This episode also kicks off back at Hawkins' lab with a bunch of murder kids, with little Eleven with bloody eyes. Like, what a way to kick off the episode. But everyone is all grown up now, navigating high school, and now being apart. And the worst part of the show is Eleven getting bullied, missing Hop, and her not having any powers as she tries to use them.
Yeah, what an incredible start to the season. We were used to slower beginnings for seasons, but no, introducing Vecna and having one of the most shocking and gory deaths of the show in Chrissy, all within the first episode, was crazy. Also, introducing Eddie, who becomes one of the most charismatic and enjoyable characters in the show.
Eddie! What a great addition. The scene with Chrissy was shocking and genuinely terrifying. This episode showed us that they were not playing around this season. I also think that this season has the best editing. For example, the basketball game versus D&D game. I loved the production of that and the parallel paired with the music.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the best put together scenes from the season. Besides from that, we were also getting hints to Joyce that Hopper was still alive, but was in Russia somewhere after we thought he died last season. Overall, this episode just did a great job setting up the season whilst also being action-packed right from the beginning. We have now reached what we together consider the top 10 episodes of Stranger Things when combining our rankings. And we start off with the highest rated episode for season 2, episode 8, The Mind Flayer, which we both individually ranked our highest for the season, even above the finale.
Your mom. This is a very dramatic episode. They are trapped in a hospital surrounded by demo dogs. We also unfortunately see the death of old Bobby Boy. That was such a heartbreaking moment, but he really was a hero. And of course, 11 coming back to save the day.
Craziest parts about Bob's death are A, they do it here in episode 8 and not the finale, and B, it happens not even halfway through this episode. I love the unexpectedness to pull the trigger like that here and still deliver on the rest of the episode after this. But that was a very sad death, as Joyce can never catch a break in this show. I enjoyed them taking Will back home and hiding him in the shed so that the Mind Flayer couldn't spy on them and figure out where he was. But yeah, overall this was the only season 2 episode to make it into our top 10, but now let's see which 9 episodes beat it in our list.
In 9th overall place, we have the Battle of Starcourt, which also ranked number 1 for both of us for season 3. This was an action-packed and terribly sad finale. We go through the deaths of Billy and Hopper, which one may argue Billy's death wasn't that sad because he is a bad person, but he had a small redemption arc when he fought off the Mind Flayer to save Eleven, and Max's reaction was heartbreaking. Hopper's death had me bawling my eyes out, but I also really enjoyed the vibrancy of this episode with all the colors and Lucas's firework idea. It was a great battle, and they had to do it all without Eleven's powers.
Yeah, quite easily my favourite of the season 3 episodes, as it is entertaining every single minute. The ridiculousness of Dustin and Susie seeing a never-ending story, meanwhile Hopper, Joyce and Murray are breaking into the secret Russian base, is hilarious and weirdly works for me. And that scene of Eleven reading Hopper's note was devastating and probably my favourite performance from Millie Bobby Brown in the whole show.
I still tear up even though I know Hopper's alive. It is also sad since the Byers and Eleven were moving and they had to say goodbye to everyone. You don't want them all to be split apart, but everyone had really been through so much.
Overall, Billy played a great antagonist for the season, being controlled by the Mind Flayer, and that final battle against the Mind Flayer itself was absolute cinema. It just appears that there were 8 episodes that were able to better the best that season 3 had to offer. I believe that this is the first episode to appear that finished in both of our individual top 10s, and it's season 1 episode 4, The Body. In my opinion, this was the episode that took me from thinking this was a pretty good show to an incredible show, and also cemented Hopper as being my favourite character, especially up until this point.
I agreed. This episode transformed season 1. We spent the previous episodes knowing something wasn't quite right, but this episode solidified the wickedness happening in Hawkins. Part of Joyce's wall is replaced with this other dimension, with Will on the other side. This is not only shocking because it is supernatural, but also they had just discovered Will's body. I think this is validating for Joyce as she sees Will and Jonathan sees the monster. The other biggest validation for Joyce is the chilling scene with Hopper and discovering Will's body is fake.
Hopper discovering Will's body in the morgue was fake is up there with one of my favourite scenes from the whole show. And typically, my favourite scenes are the high action, high stakes, dramatic moments, but this was so simple. The needle drop moment of Hopper discovering that gives me goosebumps every time seeing it, and it's really special. And then you have the moment between Joyce and Jonathan arguing about Will's body not being real, which is one of the best dialogues between 2 characters in the show for me. It felt so authentic and so real, which season 1 especially did a great job at.
Yes, this was just so authentic and so sincere to the core of the show. This episode blew me away. Although the body was astonishing, it was Holly Jolly that took our top ranking for season 1. This was a very difficult decision for me. These 2 episodes transformed the season, but in different ways. Holly Jolly, I think, had more consistent scenes that shook the show.
There's a reason we have the alphabet lights in the background, and that's because it's probably one of the first scenes people think of when you say Stranger Things. It has become synonymous with the show and was one of the most adrenaline-inducing moments as the Demogorgon appears on Joyce and chases her out of her house. Knowing that this was the creature responsible for the disappearance of Barb and Will, we didn't know what this meant for Joyce in the moment, which added to the stakes.
This episode also did great at Joyce's erratic behavior feeding through the screen. Like, are we going crazy too, or is some stuff really going down? Also, Barb being dragged into the Upside Down, chef's kiss, which is actually our first introduction to the Upside Down. What is this creepy parallel world? This episode continues the mystery and eerie vibes that makes this season so good. It was such an exciting episode.
Honestly, it was so close between Holly Jolly and The Body for the best episode of the season for me, but I just tipped it to Holly Jolly, as the ending with Will's fake body being discovered in the lake, a distraught Hopper looking on and the kids devastated. The song Heroes playing in the background, a great selection tying together this beautifully tragic ending to the episode, and then an amazing shot of Joyce and Jonathan consoling each other in the road as distant sirens made their way towards them. Into our top 6, and we're only left with episodes from season 4 and 5. Escape from Camazotz placed in 6th from both of our own rankings and overall. What an amazing start to finish episode this was. You couldn't leave the room for 1 minute, otherwise you'd miss something major going on. Starting with that insane reveal at the beginning that the Upside Down was actually a bridge between Dimension X and the real world, and this shot is just insane.
I am a sucker for the running up the hill scenes. Sadie Sink and Nell Fisher had powerful performances and were really able to feed off each other. Paired with that is the demo dogs at the hospital, which gives flashbacks to season 2. This was such a nail-biting episode. From Lucas protecting and running with Max with Robin and Vicky, to Max and Holly taking forever to get through that damn portal.
So many big moments in this one. I already think that Jonathan and Nancy breakup scene was fantastic, and them being in the situation of not knowing if they were going to live made the stakes feel as high as ever. Paired that with Dustin and Steve finally making up as Dustin pleads to Steve that he can't lose him. It really is a collection of incredible scenes scattered throughout this episode.
Dustin and Steve making up was such a relief. I think this episode really demonstrates the grief and trauma bonding that the characters have. This has been 5 seasons of dealing with all this and many deaths from such young ages. I think this episode was really important in addressing that. Now, for our top 5. What an episode. Let's discuss these big moments from the show one at a time. The beginning is the group hunting for the Demogorgon, and Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, and Dustin driving through a portal into the Upside Down. Hopper and Elle break into the military base, and Will is connecting the dots of his abilities. We are also introduced to delightful Derek, who really did steal the hearts of us fans.
That closing shot of Will tapping into his abilities and killing the Demogorgons was one of the craziest moments from the whole show. And after Will having a lackluster couple of seasons, it was cool for his importance to be skyrocketed in the show once again. I'm also a sucker for one-take shots, so Mike leading the group through the chaos in the military fighting the Demogorgons was also a really incredible and memorable scene from this episode.
I also thought Max's story of her loss in Vecna's mind was interesting. Going through his memories was unique and left you with some more questions about Henry. And as you mentioned, Will was really kind of put to the side, so the reveal of his powers were so exciting.
I can definitely imagine some of these episodes now are starting to be people's favourites, but this one unfortunately only came 5th for us, and there's 4 more that still top it. And here is our highest ranked episode for season 5 in the finale, The Right Side Up. That means our top 3 are all from season 4. But despite what a lot of people online have to say about this episode, I thought it was absolutely incredible and one of the best endings to a show I've seen. Sure, we all had our own thoughts about how things should unfold and come to a close, but I thought they absolutely delivered here.
Oh boy, I need therapy. I'd cried for more than a normal amount of days, and I still don't know if I can hear Purple Rain or Landslide normally ever again. I don't think this episode deserved the hate it got. Now, do I have my critiques? Yes. And would I have liked to see a little bit more of season 4 type writing in this season? Yeah. But I think that this was a good episode and finale.
I thought that final battle was incredible. Everyone working together doing their part kind of reminded me of that battle in the season 3 finale. And then Eleven appearing and launching herself inside the beast to have her final showdown with Vecna. The action felt the highest it had ever been for the show. I thought visually it looked as epic as I was hoping for. Vecna's death with Joyce delivering the final blow was a perfect choice in my book, and seeing everyone's trauma caused by him flashing before their eyes was a brilliant choice.
I also loved that we got to see Hopper actually encounter Vecna's mind tricks, and when he made him believe he shot 11, that was crazy. Also, it was so not cool to have the near death of Steve, but we're glad Jonathan pulled through.
My favourite part of the episode might just be finding out about Henry's past and how he came to acquire his powers. Jamie Campbell-Bower put on one of the best performances from the show in this scene, as his emotions look so authentic and actually humanised this villain momentarily. Loved the final shots closing everyone's stories brilliantly, and I even loved the credits.
Daniel and I were watching this, and I was doing my little boogie to when Doves cried, and then Daniel said, we have like an hour left, and my heart dropped. Now, lots of people criticized Mike's character, but this was a phenomenal performance by Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown. When they showed the flashbacks of them, oh my god, cut the show. And Hopper losing another daughter, I can't. And as someone who has a hard time with change, and I had a really hard time with the reality of growing up, the ending hit hard. I admired the parallels of D&D in the basement in this episode from season 1 so much. It was just such a bittersweet moment. Neither ending is fair to our girl 11. Welcome to our top 3, and I have no words. I get goosebumps still thinking about this episode.
Yeah, this one probably has the most famous scene from the show, especially with people who have never seen it. The scene with Max escaping Vecna and running to safety kind of transcended the show and became one of the biggest pop culture moments of 2022, getting Kate Bush to #1 in all of the charts. But yeah, every time I watch this scene, it still gets my adrenaline going, and overall is one of the best and most dramatic scenes that I've ever seen.
I mean, just a remarkable scene. Not only from Max running up the hill with Kate Bush, but also the shots at the graveyard, as well as Nancy and Robin's talk with Victor. I mean, just a dramatic, chilling scene from all aspects. This season was truly creepy and groundbreaking to the storyline. There are so many cinematic scenes and shots that I just can't get over. I also really like the way grief is being portrayed. These are children going through so many terrible, unnatural events. At the end, it ties back to the core theme of the show, and that is friendship. So I liked they prioritized it in this episode.
Getting Robert Englund to play Victor Krill was also incredible. Such a short presence in the series, but his impact was major. Really interesting seeing his tragic background, which then also ties into Nancy and Robin figuring out how to save Max from Vecna. And going back to talking about one-shot scenes earlier, this episode has a fantastic one, with the military storming the Byers household and shooting up the place, as Will, Mike and Jonathan narrowly escape unharmed. So a bronze medal for Dear Billy, but now it's time to find out what our top 2 episodes are for Stranger Things. Only just missing out on first place is the season 4 finale, Piggyback, which I actually had as my personal favourite, whereas Ashlyn had it in third. This is one of those episodes where it's hard to judge against a lot of the others, as this is more like a movie with its runtime and intensity. One of the craziest scenes in the whole show happens in this episode, as whilst distracting the demo bats so that Nancy, Steve and Robin can go to kill Vecna, Eddie rocks out to Master of Puppets in the Upside Down, and the visuals are insane.
This episode is a battle against Vecna, and everyone is coming for him. As Hopper, Joyce, and Murray wait for their ride out, they go to hurt the hive mind. The group and Hawkins have their plan to stop Vecna, and luckily 11 is able to piggyback from a pizza dough freezer. This had the classic, "Oh no, the good guys are losing," before the cool comeback. Once 11 steps in and fights Vecna, it is time for some really spectacular scenes. The editing of Hopper slicing up the Demogorgon, Nancy walking down Wheeler with Steve and Robin, and 11 fighting is just chef's kiss. The editing is unmatched and really just elevated the scene and made it so memorable. The cast really ate with this one, and lots of amazing performances from them.
There are also some devastating moments here as well though, as we got the death of Eddie and the temporary death of Max, which caused the destruction of Hawkins. The acting of Gaten and Joe, as well as Caleb and Sadie, made these two of the most hard-hitting and gut-wrenching death scenes that I've ever seen.
The death of Eddie and temporary death of Max were so crushing. However, we get the reunion of Hopper, which is so heartwarming. 11 really needed her dad. This is now a fierce group ready to take on Vecna. And now, what we've all been waiting for, our top ranked episode for the whole show. Our first place out of 42 episodes. Season 4, Episode 7, The Massacre at Hawkins Lab. What a journey this has been. And now, as many of you see, this was my top ranked episode, but Daniel's second. And honestly, it was so hard to choose between the top 3, and they all could have taken the spot easily. But let's discuss why this was the best episode, shall we?
Yeah, as we already saw, I preferred the season 4 finale piggyback, but take nothing away from this one, as I'm not mad at it being the overall top pick, as it is equally fantastic. For starters, Joyce and Murray finally got to the Russian prison as Hopper is facing off against the Demogorgon. After fighting off the creature and a little assistance, Hopper and Enzo survive, and we get the long-awaited reunion between Hopper and Joyce against all the odds.
This episode was so pivotal to the story. We finally get to see the long-awaited reunion of Joyce and Hopper, and I may have cried. It was so emotional and such a light for this dark season. I also loved getting to see Eleven's memories and learning about Hawkins Lab, as well as having many questions answered. An interesting moment in this episode is also learning that the Upside Down has been stuck in time since the day Will went missing. Coincidence? I think not. I would also like to point out one of my favorite shots in the whole series, and that is the editing of both groups of kids riding their bikes. The way the editing goes from them in the right side up to the upside down was cinematic and executed beautifully.
Those kinds of shots and small details really make the show what it is. But now let's talk about that big reveal. Well, first of all, we discovered that the massacre at Hawkins Lab was actually caused by Henry and not Eleven, after she removed a chip from his neck, reinstating his powers, as he was actually Dr. Brenner's first test subject. Then in one of the most intriguing and encapsulating monologues, we discover his background, revealing he was the son of Victor Creel and that he killed his family. But the reveals didn't stop there, as we then had Eleven fighting him and overcoming him, sending him into another dimension, creating a gate, where it's also then revealed that Henry has since transformed into Vecna. What a brilliant reveal, and they tied everything all together so well.
Speaking of that reveal, at the same time, Vecna is also revealing this to Nancy. The editing is jaw-dropping. The way they did the two reveals at the same time was brilliant. This is also so crucial to the story as well. We are getting answers and everything is starting to add up. The setup to the reveal started in season 1 and has been genius writing. I loved every bit of this episode.
So there we have it. That is our combined rankings of every episode of Stranger Things. So many great and memorable moments, and this was a lot of fun rewatching and putting together these rankings.
Make sure you let us know in the comments which rankings you agreed or disagreed on, as we would love to know what you thought.
And also comment what shows or movie series you would like us to rank in the future.
Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and we will see you on the next one. Bye!